Arriving at the airport earlier than expected was one of the rare pleasures that life as a businessman allowed me. The feeling of success after closing the crucial negotiation filled me with a pride I hadn't felt in a long time. By selling a large percentage of my company, I knew I was opening doors for not only my future, but also my family's. It was a golden opportunity that I couldn't pass up. As I walked through the airport lobby, the idea of surprising Emily and the kids a day ahead of schedule filled me with excitement. I could already imagine the look of happiness on Emily's face when she saw me walking through the front door. I took a taxi, anxious to get home soon. The road seemed longer than ever, perhaps due to the expectation of seeing my family again. When I finally arrived, the house was silent except for laughter and whispers coming from upstairs. Initially, I thought Emily was watching some TV show, but curiosity led me up the stairs towards our bedroom. Each step seemed to echo louder. When I reached the door, it was ajar. I looked through a crack, and what I saw left me paralyzed. Emily, my wife, was in bed with another man. The laughter and whispers I had heard were not from a TV show, but from the act of betrayal unfolding before my eyes. "John," Emily exclaimed when she saw me, her expression changing from pleasure to horror in a matter of seconds. Michael, the lover, quickly got up, trying to cover his nakedness with the sheet. What are you doing here?" Emily stuttered, her eyes wide. "I should ask you the same, Emily," I replied, trying to remain calm even though my heart was in pieces. "But I think the answer is pretty obvious." Michael tried to intervene. "John, this isn't what it seems. It's not what it looks like." I interrupted, my voice full of sarcasm and pain. "So please explain to me what exactly I'm seeing." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily couldn't face me, and Michael didn't seem to know where to run. The reality of the situation crashed over me like a crushing wave. The woman I loved, who I trusted, was so blatantly cheating on me in our own home. "Get out, Michael," I finally said, my tone now cool and controlled. "And never come back." Michael picked up his clothes scattered on the floor and hurriedly left, without looking back. Emily tried to get closer to me, tears streaming down her face. "John, please, let's talk." "To talk?" I repeated, in disbelief. "What is there to talk about, Emily? You betrayed me. You destroyed our family." She began to cry more intensely, but I couldn't bear to be there any longer. Every second in that house was a reminder of what I had just lost. "I need to get out of here," I said, turning to walk away. "I don't know when, or if, I'll be back." I quickly descended the stairs, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I got in the car and drove aimlessly, trying to process the betrayal I had just witnessed. The image of Emily and Michael together continued to turn my stomach. My only desire now was to get away, to find a place where I could think, where I could decide what to do next. I arrived at a hotel and checked in almost automatically, my mind still in shock. I went up to the bedroom and threw myself on the bed, staring at the ceiling. How could I be so blind? Signs of betrayal that I had ignored began to form in my mind. The moments when Emily seemed distant, the excuses to leave the house, the phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. How did I not see this before? I muttered to myself, the pain of betrayal slowly turning into anger. I knew I couldn't let this go. Emily and Michael should pay for what they did. And it would be me, John Anderson, who would make sure the truth came out. As I left the house, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. The image of Emily and Michael together, in our bed, was burned into my mind like a painful tattoo. With shaking hands, I called a taxi and asked it to take me to the nearest hotel. I needed a place to think, a space to organize my thoughts and decide what to do next. Arriving at the hotel, I quickly went to the room and threw myself on the bed. The ceiling seemed to spin, and my head was racing. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the pain and anger that threatened to consume me. Instead, I was flooded with a flood of memories. I remembered the day I met Emily, how we quickly fell in love, our marriage full of promises and dreams. Why would she do that? Where did I go wrong? In the darkness of the room, my mind turned to the little signs I had ignored. The text messages she quickly hid when I approached, the last-minute meetings that kept her out late, the masculine scent I once smelled on her clothes. How could I be so blind? John, are you there? Emily's sweet voice echoed in my mind, but now it sounded false. Every "I love you," she said felt like a blatant lie. I felt foolish for having blindly believed in his fidelity. I got up from the bed and went to the window. The view of the illuminated city seemed a mockery of my pain. I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go. I decided that I would not let Emily get away with this betrayal. She needed to feel the same pain I felt, needed to be exposed for what she really was. So that's it, Emily? You thought you could betray me and get away with it? I muttered to myself as a plan began to form in my mind. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to move forward. I picked up the phone and started making some calls. First, I contacted an attorney to understand my legal options. Then I called a private detective. He needed hard evidence, something he could use to expose Emily and Michael publicly. Hello, is this Detective Carlos? I need your services. It's a case of treason, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, I can meet you tomorrow. Thank you. I hung up the phone and felt a little more relieved. I had a plan, a purpose. I didn't know exactly how it would all play out, but I was determined to move forward. Emily and Michael didn't know who they were dealing with. I spent the night awake, mentally reviewing every detail of my plan. The pain of betrayal still burned, but now it was accompanied by a growing determination. Emily had destroyed our life together, and I would make sure she faced the consequences. The next morning, I met Detective Carlos in a discreet cafe. He was a middle-aged man with a serious expression and eyes that seemed to see through people. So, John, tell me more about what you want me to do, he said, as he took a sip of coffee. I need proof. Photos, messages, anything that shows Emily and Michael's betrayal. I want to expose this to everyone, I replied, feeling the anger boiling again. Carlos nodded, writing everything down in a small notebook. Got it. I'll start working on it right away. You can trust me. Thank you, Carlos. I'm counting on you, he said, shaking his hand firmly. Back at the hotel, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I knew I was starting a difficult journey, but I was determined to move forward. Emily had made her choice, and now I would make mine. She didn't know it, but she was about to face the true face of revenge. I was determined. After a sleepless night in the hotel, thinking and rethinking every detail of my life with Emily, I came to the conclusion that I needed to act. I couldn't just leave things as they were. She had to understand the extent of the betrayal, and everyone around us also needed to know what was really happening. I decided to organize a dinner. It wouldn't be difficult to get together with our closest friends and some family. After all, it was something we did quite regularly. Emily wouldn't suspect anything. I called each of them, inviting them with the excuse that I wanted to celebrate the company's trading success. Everyone readily accepted, including Emily, of course. The night of the dinner, the house was spotless. I made sure everything was perfect myself. Emily was radiant, without imagining what was to come. Little by little, the guests arrived, and the atmosphere was one of joy and relaxation. Lively conversations, laughter, and toasts. But I was nervous. I knew the crucial moment was approaching. When everyone was seated at the table, I stood up and asked to speak. I felt curious eyes turn to me. Friends, family, I want to thank all of you for being here today. This dinner is, yes, a celebration, but not exactly for the reason many of you think. I noticed some people's confused expressions, and Emily, next to me, began to look uneasy. For a long time, I believed my life was perfect. He had a wonderful wife, loyal friends, and a successful career. However, in the last few days, I discovered something that changed everything. Emily tried to interrupt. John, what are you doing? I continued, ignoring her. I discovered that my wife, Emily, the woman I love and with whom I shared so many moments, was cheating on me. A murmur of shock ran through the room. Emily stood up abruptly, with tears in her eyes. John, please don't do that. Let us talk in private. But I was determined. I took my cell phone and connected it to the TV in the living room. I started displaying the photos and messages I got from Emily and Michael. Indisputable proof of betrayal. The laughter and conversations stopped instantly. The silence was deafening. That's a lie, John. You cannot do it with me, Emily shouted, desperately trying to justify herself. Michael and it was a mistake, At this moment, my mother, who was sitting on the other side of the table, intervened. Emily, how could you do this to John? With all of us? Emily, already helpless, began to sob. The looks of disapproval, disappointment, and shock surrounded her. Our closest friends, people who had always believed in our union, now saw it in a new light. I don't know what to say, she murmured, her voice breaking, trying to wipe away the tears that were streaming down her face. William, one of my best friends, stood up and addressed me. John, I feel sorry for you, man. This is unbelievable. I nodded my thanks, but my eyes were fixed on Emily. She needed to understand the gravity of what she did, and I couldn't just let her get away with it. The pain I felt seeing her with Michael was unbearable, and now she was experiencing some of what I had been through. Emily tried to compose herself, but increasingly, the questions and accusations from our friends and family were destabilizing her. I knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same as before. She had shown her true colors, and everyone now knew the truth. When dinner finally ended, the guests began to leave, still stunned by everything they had witnessed. Emily, devastated, remained seated, unable to look me in the eye. John, she started, but I interrupted her. There is nothing more to be said, Emily. You made your choice, and now everyone knows who you really are. She hung her head, defeated. I left the room, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. The revenge was accomplished, but the pain was still intense. There was still a lot to be resolved, but at that moment, I knew I had taken the first step towards moving forward. I didn't expect the news of Emily's betrayal to spread so quickly. It was as if a fire had spread, consuming everything around. The very morning after the revealing dinner, I received a flood of messages and calls. Friends, family, acquaintances, everyone wanted to know more. Everyone wanted to understand what was happening. But I didn't have much to say. Silence was my best response. I would let the facts speak for themselves. Emily, on the other hand, was in complete despair. She tried at all costs to control the damage, but it was impossible. The truth was there, naked and raw, exposed for all to see. At work, things quickly started to fall apart. Emily's colleague, Sarah, called me in the middle of the afternoon. John, you won't believe what happened today, she began, her voice full of concern. Emily was called into her boss's office. It seems someone sent the photos and messages to him. It was a scandal.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
That wasn't my intention, I replied, trying to remain calm. The truth is, I knew this could happen, but hearing confirmation was different. It was real. She tried to justify herself, but no one believed her. Her reputation is in ruins, John. I don't know how she's going to get out of this. As Sarah spoke, I could imagine the scene. Emily, always so sure of herself, now crumbling under the weight of her own lies. It was a mix of satisfaction and sadness that took over me. I never wanted to get to this point, but now that it was done, there was no going back. Michael, in turn, decided to take the most cowardly action possible. I received a call from him, something I never thought would happen. John, we need to talk, he said, voice strained. I'm sorry about all of this. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand like this. What did you want, Michael? For me to accept your betrayal with Emily with open arms? I replied, anger boiling inside me. No, of course not. I just want to say that I'm moving away from Emily. This has gone too far. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Coward, I said, hanging up on him. It was like Michael to run away when things got difficult. He was never one to face the consequences of his actions. From that moment on, Emily was alone. Without Michael, without the support of friends and coworkers, even his family began to distance themselves. Her brother, Mark, called me one night. John, I don't know what to say. I'm shocked by all of this, he began, hesitantly. Mark, I am too. But the truth is, Emily made her choices, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I know. I just wanted to let you know that despite everything, we still consider you part of the family. We're going to help Emily get through this, but we're also here for you. That gesture of kindness touched me deeply. Despite everything, there were people who still cared, who still supported me. And that made all the difference in that dark moment. The following days were a mix of chaos and relief. I knew Emily was hurting, but part of me didn't care as much anymore. She had betrayed my trust in such a vile way that it was difficult to empathize. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that, despite everything, she was the mother of my children. We needed to find a way to deal with this in a civilized way, if not for us, then at least for them. During that period, I began to reflect on my life and the decisions that led me there. I had a company to run, children to look after, and a reputation to uphold. Emily had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. The future seemed uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would not allow Emily's betrayal to define the rest of my life. It was time to move on, rebuild, and find a new form of happiness, far from lies and betrayals. The morning sun shone through the curtains of my hotel room, but the brightness did not dispel the whirlwind of thoughts that consumed me. The image of Emily and Michael together still burned in my mind. I needed to act quickly. I couldn't let Emily take the lead in this situation. She found out I was preparing divorce papers and, like a snake, was already plotting a counterattack. That morning, I received a call from my lawyer informing me that Emily had filed a request for a contested separation, alleging that I was an absent and neglectful husband. Her audacity disgusted me. How could she turn my long hours working to ensure the best for our family into a weapon against me? "John, we need to prepare for a legal battle," my lawyer said seriously. "I know, Mark. I just can't believe her nerve," I replied, my voice full of frustration. I hung up the phone and immediately met with a private detective I had hired. He was a discreet man, but impressively efficient. I needed something concrete to turn the tide in my favor and, ideally, take Michael down once and for all. "Mr. Anderson, I've gathered some important information about Michael," the detective said, handing me a thick envelope. I opened the envelope with shaking hands and began leafing through the documents. Michael was not only a traitor, but he was also involved in illegal activities. There was evidence of bribes, money laundering, and even a connection to drug trafficking. This was the chance I needed. "This is perfect. It's all I need," I declared, feeling a ray of hope rekindle within me. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer and gave him all the evidence the detective had found. We needed to act quickly before Emily could further manipulate public opinion in her favor. The next day, I was surprised by an interview with Emily on television. She spoke with tears in her eyes, telling her side of the story, painting me as an unfeeling monster who left her alone for long periods of time. This was too much. I couldn't allow her to twist the truth like that. "Emily, you're not going to get away with this," I muttered to myself as I slammed the television down. "John, we need to call a press conference and lay out the evidence against Michael. This will not only discredit Emily, but also show that you are the real victim here," suggested Mark, my lawyer. I nodded, decided. The press conference was scheduled for the following day. I arrived at the location with my heart racing, but I knew I needed to remain calm. I went up on stage and started speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am here today to set the record straight about the recent events surrounding my marriage and the allegations made against me," I began, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I have in my hands irrefutable evidence that Michael, Emily's lover, is involved in criminal activities. And I have all the evidence to corroborate this," I declared, showing the documents to the cameras. The murmur among the journalists increased, and I knew I had captured everyone's attention. I continued to talk, revealing every sordid detail of Michael's activities. It wasn't just the betrayal that was at stake now, but the entire web of lies and crimes he had built. Emily, who was present, tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. She could no longer maintain her victim facade. The press conference turned into a real public trial, and I felt like, for the first time, I was taking back control of my life. When it was all over, I left the place with a mix of relief and exhaustion. I knew the battle wasn't completely won yet, but this was a big step towards exposing the truth. Emily tried to manipulate public opinion, but now she was cornered. And me? I was ready to fight until the end. Finally, the day of the turnaround that I had planned so much arrived. Every detail was meticulously crafted. He had spent sleepless nights, investigating and gathering evidence, all for this moment. The private detective I hired had done an exemplary job and now had in hand the information that would bring down Michael and, ultimately, Emily. You know, John, I always thought you deserved better, Rachel said once, as we discussed the final details of the plan. Rachel was an old friend, always there, always loyal. In recent months, we have become even closer. In the midst of chaos, your presence was an anchor that kept me steady. I had organized a meeting at my house, a discreet event, but with the right people present. Friends, family, and some influential figures from our social networks. It was the perfect setting for the revelation that would change everything. As people arrived and settled in, I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. Emily was there, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but I could see the tiredness and fear in her eyes. Michael, on the other hand, was not present. He had already started to pull away from Emily, trying to save his own skin, but today he wouldn't escape. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming," I began, after everyone was comfortably seated in the living room. "I have something very important to share with you." The room fell silent. Everyone was paying attention, waiting for what would come next. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "In the last few months, my life has taken a turn I never imagined," I continued. "I found out that my wife, Emily, was cheating on me with a man named Michael. That was devastating for me, but what I found out later was even worse." I looked directly at Emily, who was visibly uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to speak, but I interrupted her. "Please let me finish, Emily. You will have your chance to speak later." She lowered her head, resigned. I took a thick envelope from a small safe that was next to the couch and began to remove the documents and photos that the detective had obtained. "This is Michael," he said, holding up a photo of him. "Not only did he cheat on Emily with several other women, but he is also involved in illegal activities. Here is the proof." I passed the documents and photos around the room, allowing everyone to see them. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs of shock and disbelief filled the room. Emily was pale. Her hands were shaking as she tried to process what was happening. "Michael was arrested this morning," I continued. "He is being investigated for fraud, money laundering, and various other criminal activities." "Emily, did you know any of this?" "John, I didn't know," she stuttered, tears streaming down her face. "I swear I didn't know." "It's hard to believe you, Emily," I replied, my voice cold. "But that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that the truth has come out." The friends and family present began to express their support for me, while Emily curled up on the couch, completely humiliated. She had lost the support of everyone around her and was now isolated. After the meeting, Rachel approached me, a gentle smile on her face. "You were amazing, John," she said, touching my arm. "You deserve to be happy." I looked at her, feeling something new and hopeful rise up inside me. "Thank you, Rachel. You have no idea how important your presence has been to me." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I'll always be here for you, John. I always have been." In the days that followed, life began to take a new direction. Emily lost her job and became estranged from everyone. As for me, I started to see a different future, a future where Rachel and I could build something together. As we walked through the park weeks later, Rachel held my hand. "John, what do you say we start over?" she asked, her voice full of hope. I smiled at her, feeling the promise of a new beginning in her gaze. "I'd love to, Rachel. Let's build something beautiful, together." And so, with the past finally behind me, I began to look to the future with renewed hope and the promise of true love.